Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are very much happy to welcome you all here. Sorry that we are a little bit late according to our schedule. This third AIDIA distinguished lecture, we have done the first one during Corona with the then Secretary of India, Harshavardhan Shringla, now who is the member of Rajya Sabha since last week. And then second was with Mr. Mamadov, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Azerbaijan. And this is the third AIDIA distinguished lecture, and we are very much happy to welcome you all in this evening. Today's guest is none other than Shishir Priyadarshi, who was the director of World Trade Organization during the very difficult times when there was a lot of agreements and disagreements. He took part in those agreements. Detailed introduction will be done by the founder of AIDIA, Sunil Kesiji. Before that, I'll like to welcome you all, and I'll invite Mr. Sunil Kesi to welcome you all in this August gathering.
Good afternoon and namaste everyone. First of all, let me welcome Mr. Shishir Priyadarshi, President of Chintan Research Foundation, and I would also like to congratulate. I would also like to congratulate you, sir, for your first anniversary of Chintan Research Foundation, and I wish you all the best for the future activities. So let me welcome everyone here from the government, from academia, think tank, and my colleagues from the Chamber of Commerce, and also from the Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Supplies. And also I would like to welcome my old colleague Chalise in Nepal. So thank you, Kuberji, for your MC. And I hope that you had a wonderful flight this morning. I know that you have been in Nepal many times, but for our institution, this is the first time. So we heartily welcome to you. And this is the third AIDIA distinguished lecture, which AIDIA hosted today. And this is a series we host with the very, very prominent people, basically in the economic sectors, because the main focus of AIDIA is the economic engagement with various countries, and we have been doing this for last 11 years. So this is the third series, and we are happy to have a very, very distinguished personality from India who heads the Chintan Research Foundation, is one of the important institutions in India, and he is also the head of the global relations for the Adani Group, which is the largest conglomerate in India, and who have a business interest in Nepal as well, as we heard in the media. And he was also the director in the WTO and as an IS officer as well. And he worked with the World Bank and other multilateral institutions, also with the UNCTAD and a couple of other institutions, a very distinguished personality with us today. And I will be happy that he will have more conversation with you participants directly. And I think now I'll be happy to invite him for his keynote remarks. Then Kuberji will have the conversation. Then we'll go for the Q&A session. Thank you once again, and once again welcome everyone for this third distinguished lecture series. Thank you.
Sunilji, thank you so much. Kuberji, thank you also to you. And a very warm namaste from me to all of you present here. I've always very much valued my trips to Nepal. I've been here a very large number of times from the WTO. This was a period when Nepal was just joining the WTO. There was a very arduous accession process that Nepal had followed. At that point of time, there were a lot of misgivings, I would say, or question marks and apprehension that whether or not joining the WTO would be beneficial to Nepal. And while the official line from the WTO, like it should have been, was one, no, you join and literally the heavens will open up. But I think the people negotiating from the Nepalese side also needed an informal, honest voice to tell them both the positives and negatives of joining the WTO. And I think I'll take pride in the fact that I did provide that honest and transparent feedback that while joining the WTO is supposed to open up a lot of avenues, but usually the first decade or so is tough. Because, when markets open up and your own market is included in that, then the challenges and opportunities always vie with each other. And sometimes the challenges are more. So that's another story. But yes, the reason is that is the reason that I have always valued my trips to Nepal. In fact, I was mentioning to Sunilji, I have been here many times, but each trip has always seemed short, including this one, and I have to, for various other reasons, fly back tomorrow. But each time, my father used to say this, that if you really like some place, then always go away with a feeling of wanting to come back. And I think that is exactly what I would always want to do with Nepal, is to go back feeling I haven't stayed enough so that I quickly plan again. But genuinely, Sunilji, thank you for this opportunity. I am delighted and honored to be speaking before a very distinguished gathering. And as you know, the theme of the topic that we've mutually decided I should speak on is, to kind of, in a way, to explore the opportunities and the implications for Nepal as India moves into this trillion and post-trillion dollar economy. So thank you for that opportunity. I think it's probably also extremely timely because, Nepal is India's closest neighbor. And with the ties that exist, perhaps, which was my own feeling as I shared with you when I was in the WTO, the destinies and the history of the two countries are clearly intertwined. And importantly, I think India's journey into the economic trajectory that it finds itself now is not national. At the moment, it's become much more than a national journey. It's a regional journey, and importantly, very much Nepal is part of that region. And I think for Nepal, which is obviously India's longest time-tested partner, it's not just the tangible opportunities that India's economic growth opens up, but in some ways, I think it's also an opportunity to build an even stronger partnership in transforming this region. So for me, the key word really, and I think that must underscore the relationship between the two countries, is of mutual respect and partnership. These are two, in many ways, equal partners, and both will benefit from each other. But let me start with a bit about India, but more importantly, I tried to find 4 or 5 reasons why India seems to have done well in the last decade or so. Now, obviously, at the moment, it's a really strong GDP. We've had growth of last many years, 7% plus, moving very close to a 4 trillion economy. But that's a fact. I think more important is to really look behind these numbers and to see what could have led to this growth. Now, when you start trying to identify, then you suddenly realize that, there are many reasons. And I'll obviously, and most of you being part of industry, part of economy, part of think tanks like yours, are aware of it. So I set myself a target. I said, look, if I have to identify just 5 reasons, no more, then which of the many reasons that have contributed to India's growth would I identify? And I'm sure there'll be economists who will differ with the 5 that I picked. I'll share them with you, and if you have differences, then over a cup of tea, we will, or through your questions, you can quiz me and tell me I'm wrong. Look, the first reason, I think, in the last 10, 15 years, there has been massive revenue collection. Whether it has been through expanding the personal tax bases, or it has been through the GST scheme that was put in place. But the total revenue to the government has really gone up. And I think that, to me, is the most important thing, because no matter what else the government has done, having a large coffer, having a large, and this comes about through a very large number of appropriate fiscal policies, monetary policies, digitalization, which again is another reason I'll talk about. But yes, the first reason I thought very importantly is to identify the large revenue collection. And I'm identifying this so that maybe later we can try and see if there's some amount of duplication or replication possible in Nepal. The second reason is that you had this large revenue, but it's gone into 4 very important areas. It's gone into infrastructure, it's gone into energy production, it's gone into manufacturing, and it's gone into new technology. And by new technology, I'm including, obviously things like green energy, things like AI, things like, anything which is of the future, including right up to the space. So the revenue was there, but it has gone into sectors which have generated further growth. And I think that is what has led to this cyclical effect, that you've got investments, but those investments are leading to greater jobs, manufacturing, production, which in turn is leading to greater revenue collection. So it's become a cycle. So that really is the second point. The third, in a way, flowing from the second, is that very consciously India has started putting itself as both a manufacturing and a service providing hub. But the interesting thing, and there I think India has still got a few more steps to take, these days it's very difficult to just become a total, manufacturer of an entire thing. It's much, much better to be part of a regional or a global value chain. And I think to do that, what you need to do is facilitate the import, add value, and then facilitate the export. India had always been pushing its export, but into some ways it used to have a closed market. And I think that has changed significantly. And the way the manufacturing sector and the service providing sector, including, as I said, in green tech and high-tech manufacturing, that probably is the third most important point. The fourth, which partially I just touched upon, but the rapid digitalization of the Indian economy. It's really, it's the fact that today the kind of systems that India has in place are being sought after and replicated, and actually MOUs are being signed even at the level of the Prime Minister when he goes and visits other countries for the UPI system in India to be replicated in other systems. And if you combine that with the fact that we have now over 500 million internet users, that's like having 50 crores internet users, that's really changed the economy drastically, because the way your market expands once you have this kind of outreach, it's amazing. And the fifth and final point is really this, burgeoning middle class. We have a very, very strong middle class, and I think for any country to grow, you really need a strong middle class for 2 reasons. One is you have the bigger the middle class is showing that the economic benefits are flowing down. They're not restricted to the creamy layer or the top strata. And the second is the middle class, which gives you the consumer push that you need. They provide the buying power. So I think these were the five reasons that I thought. But then importantly, we've got to see, in the context of what we're talking, why does India's rise matter to Nepal? What are the implications for India's economic growth to Nepal? And obviously, post that, what can be done so that Nepal becomes a partner and a beneficiary of this growth? Now, I think, and that's a very important point of the rest of my remarks, is as long as we see Nepal as, and this must be seen within India too, Nepal as the most natural partner to whom the outreach and benefits of this growth accrue, then we are ensuring that there is this partnership between where India's growth is helping Nepal, and then in turn Nepal growth further helps India. When you're in the WTO, you do travel a lot, and you travel to different countries, and you pick up bits and pieces. And the one thing I would always try and do, including from Nepal, was to pick up some of the local proverbs. And most of them now are known elsewhere. But something which struck me when I was, preparing these notes was that, I think the Chinese proverb, which I'm about to tell you, probably best indicates what Nepal and India should look at, is that when the tide rises, all the boats rise. And I think that's really, for me, the most important thing. We must regard ourselves being in the same ocean, the same two boats. Sure, one boat's bigger, one boat's smaller. That's not a problem. But when the tide rises, that means when there is economic growth, then both countries will benefit. And I think India's trillion-dollar ambition must act as a catalyst for the region. Because, the more interdependence, because there's a huge buy-in for India too, the more dependent you are on each other. And I think that, for me, is something we must consciously strive. In the earlier days, there was this whole thing about being independent, but self-independent, self-production. I think today, we must be dependent on each other. And the reason, because dependence results in actually peace. And I'm not just talking about India and Nepal. India and Nepal, sure, that's absolutely fine. But globally too, the more dependent you are, the more stronger the political relations. But here too, I identified 5 issues or themes or areas that Nepal would definitely or could definitely benefit from. The first, obviously, is trade and market access. There's no doubt about it. You look at Nepal's placement, you're a closest neighbor. You look at the fact that you have preferential access, absolutely there. So the fact is that the more India grows and the more there is a demand, then this Nepal's largest trading partner must do much more to balance the trade gap. There is an imbalance in the trade, and I think what you now need to do is, and again, I'm probably repeating what all of you probably know, that there's a huge market there, but it's also true that that huge market is already being supplied by local manufacturers. So you've got to provide the USP. You've got to provide something that is not being provided for. It could either be cost effectiveness, because in some ways you definitely should be able to provide things the same quality, if not better quality, at perhaps as economical prices. But more importantly, as India's rise and as the middle class grows there is this very natural demand for products which I think are much more easily kind of being made here, and I think Nepal is known for that. Nepal is becoming more and more known. You use the word organic, the first thought comes Nepal. You use the word artisanal, Nepal. You use the word niche Himalayan products, who else but Nepal? So I think there is an opportunity there, and trade and commerce must be accompanied or must, even in advance of that growth, we must have greater trade facilitation. Greater trade facilitation and border kind of facilitation, because only then can this trade increase. Sure, it's an open border, it's a porous border, but we need to do more in that regard. And I came across a very interesting suggestion that, we could really think of developing industrial clusters which are in the proximity of the Indo-Nepal border, and these industrial clusters could actually feed off each other. You've got an industrial cluster here which is benefiting from certain things being made across Nepal. That comes in, and that then gets imported. I think this is something which then I've also included in my final 5 recommendations. But look, the second thing which I think Nepal would stand to benefit is infrastructure and connectivity. There's a huge amount. I mean, India is probably spending around $120 billion annually on infrastructure. And if even part of that comes across right up to the border and facilitates what could be from the Nepalese side, the infrastructure there, then you've got the right ingredients for increasing trade and commerce. So you definitely need, this strong focus on ensuring that on the Nepalese side too, you've got the infrastructure which is matching, and I'm sure there's the various kinds of possibilities, the Asian Development Bank, you've got the other such funding mechanisms, and India itself. I mean, it's to India's advantage too. So I am told that there are a number of things where India's investment in infrastructure will help. The 2 or 3 things that I do want to specifically mention, there's the Mahakali Bridge, there is the Jogbani Biratnagar and the Janakpur Jayanagar Bardibas railway line, and obviously the Hulaki Road. But all this will not only ensure greater trade facilitation, but will also ensure greater people-to-people connectivity. And that's why in the second point, I didn't say infrastructure alone. I actually said connectivity, because connectivity through roads, connectivity through air. I was just told about this international airport coming up at, or already has come up at Lumbini. And this will only add to that connectivity. But the connectivity is also these days digital. So, the entire infrastructure stream will help ensure that this second point of connectivity also comes up. There is obviously, which I did mention, about the industrial linkage. By identifying what is the kind of supply chain linkage that India requires, I think it's a phenomenal opportunity that why should India be importing that from, further distance away, whether Southeast Asia, whether China, whether other places. But again, you have, and I think these are big advantages, you have a young and trained workforce. You obviously have access to the Indian markets under favorable conditions. There is 100% political goodwill, and importantly, cultural familiarity. And again, I presume and hope there is definitely, as compared to India, cost advantage both in land and labor. The important thing is you can't have an amorphous approach to supply chain connectivity. It'll have to be very targeted, very sector-oriented. Which are the sectors? And obviously, again, you guys know more than I do, but when I listen or read or interact with some of my Foreign Service friends who've been posted here, then clearly, you've got things like textiles, you've got things like cement, you've got consumer goods, tourism, obviously. I keep hearing pharma, agri-processing, but these already, in significant amount exist, or significant level exist in Nepal, and I think they can be further expanded. So as India grows and as India's needs increase, I think these are sectors. And really, I don't like using that word, but it seems to be used globally. So I'm only mentioning it, but I'm mentioning it with the caveat that I don't like it. I used to read about for Mexico being the satellite manufacturing hub for the US. I used to read for Vietnam being the same for China. We'll find another better word for it. And I'd rather call it a partner manufacturing base. And I think that is what we really should push for Nepal to be recognized as India's partner manufacturing base. But the fourth, and probably one of the most important fallouts, and I think already we are moving in that direction, is energy cooperation. There's, if there is one low-hanging fruit in this relationship, in which Nepal should benefit is really the supply of power to India. India's power needs are huge, and if you couple it with the fact that India is committed both to 50% of its power being clean and green by 2030 and zero net emission by 2070, no better opportunity for both countries than the export and import, if required, of power. I know there's been a recent India-Nepal power trade agreement, and the target is a very ambitious 10,000 megawatt target. But we've got to get, and I know that I wear two hats. I wear a hat of a think tank on the basis of which I am speaking a lot of this, but I also wear the Adani Group's global president hat. And while I'm not limiting myself to the Adani Group, but the fact is very clear that we must get those private sectors participants on both sides who have a history of delivering. Very often we've provided opportunities to state actors who've probably may have had the will to do so, but have not really come off with flying colors in terms of time. And I think time is of the essence today. If Nepal has to grow at that same speed, if India has got to be a partner in that growth, then we've got to get the thermal and hydro projects offline very, very quickly. And while, yes, there's a lot of talk of the Panchveshwar Dam, and I know we've got to focus on that becomes an important aspect of this. But don't forget one thing. Simply by generating power is not enough. You can't think about the grid connectivity, and you can't think about the transmission lines after the power has started being produced. This is a mistake about 20 years back India did. We suddenly had a lot of power production, but at that time, our transmission lines and our grid connectivity was not as good as it should have been, and then, you had to really put in a lot of pace there. So I think it's extremely important that while we focus a lot on power generation, we don't lose the focus on connectivity and transmission. And the final point is really, and I think no amount said on this respect is less, is the people-to-people connect. There's already a very strong connect, I think, on both sides. And really, this is something, whether we build it through further educational connect, whether we build it through, obviously, business connect, but importantly, I think even skilling programs. I think this is our next should be the target, where if India is needing a certain skill in its workforce, and Nepal is both, providing a center for that skilling, or even in the context of providing the skilled workforce, then the kind of, relationships we have, the two countries have, I think this makes for. So these are obviously, and if you combine in this people-to-people contact, the cultural and even religious connect I have. I was mentioning to Sunilji that my first posting as an Indian Administrative Service officer was in this most wonderful, very small town then of Kushinagar. So really, if my journey started with the blessings of Lord Buddha on an everyday basis, the sub-divisional magistrate, which I was of that small town, just about 50 kilometers north of Gorakhpur, one of the most amazing things that to date, I recall as that being the most, and incidentally, I also got married during that period. So that's another blessings of that I continue to retain from that time. But, and I move on to the third and final part of my talk, opportunities don't automatically convert to outcomes. Let me repeat that. An opportunity may exist, but it will not automatically convert to an outcome. You definitely have to work single-mindedly, purposefully, with a certain objective to convert opportunity into outcome. Opportunity today exists. Opportunity certainly exists because of the growth in India, and I must say, and really accompanied by growth in Nepal. If you simply look at your own power situation, it's improved. You look at your per capita income, it's improved. To even have a 4% growth on a fairly sustained basis, I think it's very, very creditable to the people pushing economy, industry, and business in Nepal. But to make use of the opportunities, and this is what I would like to end my talk with, I make 5 sorry, I've got fixated on 5, but I thought 5 is about what most that attention can take. So 5 small recommendations. A number of, I'm sure, including like Nikki is, there are joint initiatives. But I really want to just leave for people like Sunil to think of, we need something, we really need to call it the India-Nepal Economic Opportunity Forum. Let's create what is an economic opportunity forum. And trust me, the way this forum will succeed, or the only way that this forum will succeed, if both countries find it to be a win-win situation, and the forum is amongst 2 countries which regard each other as equal partners. Equality leads to mutual respect, and mutual respect leads to mutual benefits. So we need to have in India, Nepal, and if the abbreviations fall better, then I think actually a Nepal-India Economic Opportunity Forum might even be a better thing. Let's do it. You've got the experience of Nikki, you've got AIDIA, you've got other people. That's 1. 2, we must operationalize that low-hanging fruit that I talked about. The power trade between the countries, the earlier we achieve that 10,000 megawatt by both initially focusing on generation, then focusing on production, transmission, grid connectivity, it is extremely important. I think, the need to prioritize hydropower projects, especially as I already mentioned, Pancheshwar project, ensuring smooth power purchase agreement. PPAs are as important. You could have it, but if you have a PPA which has loopholes, which has gray areas, it won't work. And developing sub-regional grids. The whole talk about a whole South Asian grid has been in the pipeline for long. It's not coming through, but at least India and Nepal could definitely have, a kind of sub-regional grid. 3rd, I was talking about industrial hubs on both sides, but perhaps even better is to build special economic zones which stretch across both borders. Both countries have special economic zones. We have our special economic zones. But how great it would be if you could have a special economic zones, half of which was in Nepal, half of which was in India, and yet connected within. Because special economic zones are supposed to do exactly that. Or transcend the barrier of a border so that what you produce inside the special economic zone gets facilitated straight away. It's manufactured and straight away it's there where required. So there are certain caveats that both countries would like to be fulfilled, but till we start talking about common cross-border special economic zones, this will remain just a thought. So I think really there are various parts on the Nepal-India border where this could be thought of and considered, but I think that's really the 3rd point I make. Let's think of starting and that's the 4th point, a Nepal-India startup and innovation bridge. And by this, really, it's a small thing, I've got the greatest respect because of what I know of Nepalese entrepreneurs. Greatest respect. But where they cross or they find a hurdle is in financing of their thoughts and ideas. What if we linked through this bridge, through this startup and innovation bring, we could link the Nepalese entrepreneur with an Indian incubator investor. Again, benefits for both sides. The Indian incubator investor gets equity. Hopefully that equity rises. I think we must think of this very strongly. The Indian incubators are often just thinking of Indian entrepreneurs. Sure, they must. And the important thing is, through the digital connectivity, if we can somehow connect the Nepalese entrepreneur, then you are allowing this operationability to complement this initiative. And I think it'll go a long way into feeding all the points we spoke about earlier, about skills, about technology, about manufacturing. And finally, obviously, really and strongly, I think that border infrastructure must be improved on both sides. If India is investing, its investment must lead up to the Nepal border. If Nepal is investing, its investment must lead up to this. So those are 5 points, but again, even for those 5 points which I said, you will require the 4 arms of any initiative to work hand in hand. 1, the governments will obviously have to deepen further, this already exists, but deepen further the policy coordination. They'll need to streamline trade procedures and invest in whatever facilitates greater trade. For business, you probably need to seek joint ventures, insist on technology transfer, and innovative partnerships that leverage the strengths of both nations. For media and scholars, I think you need to foster informed debate. You need to highlight success stories. You need to also pinpoint the shortcomings of failure stories. Failure is as important a path of growth and learning. If hydro projects haven't moved, why haven't they moved? What can we do better next time? But that is the job of media and scholars. And finally, for all of us people present in the room, we must strongly believe that there is a future that is win-win, that is based on equality and trust. And here too, and I will probably end with that, the relationship between the two countries is marked by proximity, and at the moment there could also be a perceived asymmetry because of the kind of growth in one. But I think this asymmetry must not create any apprehension, but must be our catalyst for creating mutual accountability. I really very strongly feel that. Because India's support, has been for centuries, is obviously rooted in partnership, and economic, social, and infrastructural development have to be both common priorities and for the mutual benefit. I said that I keep learning these phrases and proverbs, and one of the most important things really is it's valid for any two neighbors, but I think even more so for us. Geography creates neighbors, obviously, but history makes us friends. But it is destiny and proactive action that we take that will make us partnerships. And for that, it's very important that private sector is not merely a stakeholder in development, but it is a driver of that transformation. Thank you for your attention. Bahut dhanyabad.
Thank you, sir, for your very delightful and very insightful talk. I was just checking the data when we thought of these topics to discuss on India's $1 trillion ambition. Actually, India is already a $1 trillion economy. Like you said, it's almost $4 trillion. That's 4.19 to be exact by 2025. And it's going to be $5 trillion economy in 27. And by mid-30s, it will be $10 trillion. And why it's happening, like Priyadarshi sir explained, the strong manufacturing hub and the growing appetite of Indian economy, and which is fueled by the private sector actually. And here today, most of the audience are from private sector also. That would be much more interesting to hear your perspective. Why this $1 trillion economy of India's trickle-down effect couldn't help Nepal to kick off more partnership between private sector to private sector?
Thank you, Kuber. Making a speech was the easier part. And, now comes the more difficult part, because I must tell you that we traveled from the airport to the hotel together, Kuber and I. And this was the first time I was told कि आपको सब question answer भी session करना पड़ेगा. So I tried hard to get from him the questions. I said, बता दो भाई. But true to his profession, he didn't. No, I'm obviously, that was in a lighter vein. But look, if for a moment, let's regard there is no boundary, I mean no political boundary, right? Then there is absolutely no reason that whatever is happening, growth in India, if it is percolating down to a district, the northern districts of Uttar Pradesh, there is no reason it shouldn't percolate down to Nepal too. There's no reason at all. But we have borders, we have some limitations, obviously, and that's the sovereignty that two countries both give and expect the others to give. In that context, Kuber, what is really important is, I would say, the kind of connect that today is being established between business and industry here, and with the second hat that I wear, which is the Adani Group hat, there. Because occasions like this will open the door. How far you walk through the door is dependent on us. Look, the issue is that if today there is, let us say, an industry in, for example, in Uttar Pradesh, which is outsourcing something from another part of India. But if we can convey to them and make the connect that this same product is available in Nepal, can actually be exported to India and still reach at a cheaper price, there is no reason why the person will not start importing it. I mean, there's no, because finally, we may talk about leadership, innovativeness, but for the private sector, and we should not be at all apologetic about it. The private sector needs to make money. Full stop. I grew up also about 40 years back when we were studying in a very socialistic pattern of society. Making money was not regarded as a good. Yes. No. The private sector makes money, the country benefits. You create jobs, you create economic growth, you create these regional hubs. So I think as long as we are there to facilitate. But the most important facilitator, Kuber, is the government. And here it's not the Indian government, but it's much more the government of Nepal, which has to really ensure that private sector's growth is facilitated. Again, I only have India's example. I don't know how far it will relate to all of you. But very often the rules that we make in my country are geared towards that 1% of the people who might break the rule. Because of which the 99% of the people who follow the rule have to also do those arduous things. Someone told me, oh, you're setting up a think tank. It's like, Vasco da Gama, because Vasco da Gama went into the unknown and discovered spices. And when I set up the think tank, guess what I found? Triplicate and quadruplet forms that have to be filled up. There is so much bureaucracy in anything we do. Why? Because that 1% might just break the rule. So I think, the government's views are changing. And I'm certain that's true for Nepal too. But private sector has got to be regarded as the flag bearer of economic growth. Private sector's growth's got to be supported, and making money is to be recognized as an important thing for the country. Sir.
When we were talking about the private sector should be the flag bearer, and it's obviously that's true in Nepal and India both. We have experienced that also. When the private sector is in the driving seat, the growth has been leaps and bounds. But again, the whole thing boils down to how the private sector of the two countries can work together despite, like when you were talking about energy cooperation, I was just remembering there are almost 3-4 Indian government entities that are working in Nepal. SJVN, GMR, and 2-3 others also. But still, like Adani Group, it's not in Nepal energy sector till now. Others are also not. Why? What is blocking these two Nepali and Indian private sector to come together? And there is government-to-government policies also there. When we say government must act first, government has already acted. Government has already signed the agreement that India will import 10,000 megawatt of electricity. So the road is there, map is there, and policy is there. Why still the private sectors are not coming together?
Two parts to your question. One, more broadly, that what really needs to be done to ensure that private sector is a flag bearer. And two, perhaps a more specific point to that is that how come in these hydro projects, in spite of both the will and the wish of the governments, we haven't seen action. If you ask me for the first part, and I think this is true world over, there are two extremely important issues that need to be addressed if you want to support the private sector. One is you have to ensure availability of finance and liquidity. You know, the private sector can't work magic. You can only, that's the biggest, hurdle in whether it is the MSME sector, whether it is the large sector, whether it is the village and artisan sector, at different levels, you have to ensure liquidity. Liquidity can come about through NFBCs, liquidity can come about through banks, liquidity can come about through various things, but what it needs is a strong push from the central bank. The central bank needs to say that, look, this percentage of any banking system's loan must go to the private sector. Liquidity, for me, is spot one. The spot two is the availability of skilled manpower. You will only set up something if you know that you'll have the people to run it. You will absolutely not venture to set up. So there's got to be a very close link between educational and technical institutions which are providing this kind of a training and the needs of the industry. I'll go even to the extent of saying that I know in India, many years back, there was this group called the Punj Lloyd Group, which had taken up a lot of projects, largely construction projects in the Middle East, just didn't have enough skilled manpower. So they set up their own institute. We'll set up an institute, we know exactly what we want. Obviously, that needn't be done by everyone, but what you need is a correlation. And I said two, but let me add a third. You've got to continuously be focusing on technology adaptation. You need technology. Technology can be transferred, technology can be bought, but technology cannot be adapted by others. So you will, and that becomes a very, very important part of if you're wanting to be ahead of the race rather than wanting to play catch-up. We can all play catch-up. But catch-up, by the time you play catch-up, the other person's gone another 5 years ahead. So you want to be ahead of the race, think of the technology that you need ahead. That's on the more broad question. On the thermal power thing, I don't think I really have the full answer. I may have the partial answer. I don't have the full answer right now, but this is definitely some work. Now I wear my other hat of the Chintan Research Foundation and perhaps within close cooperation with AIDIA too. We really want to get into and do some very strong evidence-based research on why thermal power projects haven't got off the line. What is it that has kept it? There's been goodwill, there's been MOUs, there have been strong players. The National Power Thermal Corporation, very strong player. GMR, very strong player. Why hasn't it really kicked off? I don't know. I really would be perhaps, doing disservice if I attempted the answers. But I know that definitely going ahead, we must get, again, all governments obviously do everything on the basis of L1, L2, L3. That's the way we are, because we are all bureaucrats, for former bureaucrats like me, everyone's protecting their backs. How can I sign it? No, we must get beyond it. Experience or the marks you give to experience or the kind of penalties that you put in place for delays in projects, I think that must override. Because look, the country's growth is paramount. Nepal's growth is paramount. And thermal power, or the earlier you can ensure completion of projects, that much quicker the next generation will benefit. And we're all committed here. We all have families, children. The next generation has to benefit quicker and more than whatever benefits we got. And for that, we've got to ensure that a lot of these things are put into action quicker.
I'll leave this question to the floor afterwards. I'll just shift the question to WTO a little bit. Then I'll come to the floor. Nepal, when Nepal got the membership of WTO. Here is one secretary, former secretary also was there in WTO when you were there. When we were being the member of WTO, there was a very much enthusiasm about that Nepal will get this much benefit. You also touched upon that a little bit, but I want you to elaborate on that. But looking back today, what we see if we go through the data, being a member of WTO, Nepal got nothing. Nepal couldn't get any. You can put it either way. Nepal couldn't take any advantage, or Nepal didn't get anything from WTO. How do you see this? Why Nepal couldn't get any advantage of being a WTO member?
I'm glad you're asking me this question after I've left the WTO. Because if I had given an honest answer while I was in the WTO, I might have headed for a slightly premature retirement. I might have been sure that. But no, I'll still try and provide what could be a balanced response. Look, any time that a country is in the process of joining the WTO, this debate happens in every country. It happened in India, it happened in Nepal. Should we or should we not? And invariably, the naysayers, or the people who have some concerns, have a strong voice. Sometimes to win them over, far greater benefits are projected as flowing to you than they actually finally flow. And I'll give you an example from India. India was very hesitant in 1995. I know half the people in this room weren't
1995, January 1, India got the membership.
Well, I mean, that was the culmination of the Uruguay round, and from GATT we were transiting to WTO.
Yes.
India was extremely reluctant to sign on to the new set of agreements. And India was promised the world in terms of agriculture and textiles. There were these two sectors which were important to India, and you were promised the world. And post 1995, you found that the most protected sector was agriculture. And the most distorted sector was textile. Textile, can you believe it? There was supposed to be an opening up of the textile sector. And this was based on certain HS lines of trade that you would know so well. And what was said was that 30% of, I'm just giving you an example, that 30% of the textile lines will be made quota-free at the end of every 2-year period. Fair enough? So what you're saying is that 30% of the lines on which textiles is traded will become quota-free at the end of 2-year period. But guess what? No one said which textile lines. So the first 2 years, 30%, the next 2 years, 30%, the first 60% of tariff textile lines were those which didn't have any textile trade. What was the point of liberating that? So there is this mixed bag. On the positive side, again, as all of you know, the MFN market access that you get when you become a member of the WTO is actually a big thing, irrespective of your political relationships. And I know in the context of Nepal, a large amount of the trade is with India. And that already was great. So there's no more.
We actually didn't need WTO. Nepal-India trade
truthfully,
agreement was much better than that.
Truthfully, I would today agree on that. And I think that is the path that perhaps to some extent Bhutan is also following. They've got a WTO accession process. They're not hurrying into it. But I'll be very candid on one thing. And that's why I said I'm glad you're asking me this question now. What Nepal signed on to the dotted line when it joined was even more stringent terms and conditions than LDCs which were already members of the WTO were giving. So Nepal was asked to do more than what existing LDCs which were member of the WTO had to give. And it was the proverbial Shylockian pound of flesh. But, and really, and I'm very sincere about my next sentence, is Nepal better off being in the WTO or outside? I still think that this is one forum which provides you the kind of equality, at least theoretically, that no other international forum provides. And I'm very sincere that it's better to be inside and fight and keep raising all the concerns you have and keep fighting for because you are inside the WTO, you have this most amazing thing, consensus principle, which no other international organization have. You know, sometimes I would, Kuberji, apologies for the long answer. Have you ever wondered why is the World Bank always headed by an American and why is the IMF always headed by a European? Because between the US and Europe, they have a majority of voting rights in both the organizations because there it is a weighted system of voting. It's not one country, one vote. It is in proportion to what you're contributing to the budget of the World Bank and IMF. And because there is a weighted system of voting, the two countries together, or the two groups together, the US and the European Union, have a majority in both organizations, and it's a division of spoils. If I can translate it into Hindi stroke Nepali is, wo aap le lo, ye main le leta hu. Now, that WTO does not do. The smallest of member, take Vanuatu. Forget Nepal, there is a big member. Take Vanuatu. If you had a map the size, of this room, then Vanuatu might be a small speck. Only then. In a normal map, you wouldn't see Vanuatu. Its share of global trade, as officially on the WTO website, is 0.00%. And yet, when there is a meeting, Vanuatu has exactly the same, on paper, theoretically, the same voting right as the United States of America. No other international organization gives that, and therefore, in spite of the ills, in spite of the feeling Nepal's not benefited, it's better to be inside.
I'll come to that again. I think mics. I will open the floor first. Let's take some questions from the floor. Then again, I'll come to you. Please introduce yourself and keep your questions short and very
and if there are no questions, no problem.
Please, yeah. Yes, please.
Okay, should I go first? Okay. Thank you very much, Shishirji, for this insightful lecture. My name is Pradeep Panthi, and I belong to Policy Research Institute of Nepal government. But I spent longer time abroad in Japan and working in international research institutions. So I came to Nepal just 3 months before, and then I'm learning what's going on in my country. So looking after my experience listening to different scholars from India in international forum, one of the scholars I listened about in Tokyo was one of the economists from ADB. And then in India, while talking about Indian economic growth, and there is a recent phenomenon that what should India choose to have economic growth, a sustainable economic growth in the future. And then discussion is going on in terms of service exporting economic structures or by diving into the manufacturing sector as it is. So while depending on those discussions, you may have heard about the talk from economist Raghuram Rajan also. So he's very much advocating about service export. At the same time, some of the South Asian economies, we are talking about regional economic integration also. Some of the South Asian economies are also highly dependent on imports, imports of manufacturing goods, and then struggling to have leapfrog development in manufacturing export or something like that. And Nepal is one of the country that is suffering from. So while having these discussions on $1 trillion ambitions of India, how do you examine the economic prospect in terms of service exporting country and then manufacturing exporting country? And then what would be the effect on Nepalese economy from that perspective? And in another question, you talk about the one of the major fundamental strategic pillar that we should depend on to have a spillover from Indian economy to Nepal is infrastructure connectivity. So in my perspective, then one of the biggest issue of these regional integrations and then cross-border integrations of these two countries in terms of infrastructure, then one of the hottest issue is the security. security concern of India, or how the Indian government consider Nepal in terms of regional security. So by looking these two perspectives, can you please provide some insights that can guide Nepalese scholars and then policy makers so that we can have a more trust-oriented integrations in the future? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Should we take 2, 3 and get answer, or
As long as
what
I,
will be
as long as
easier
between,
for you?
no, I think it's better to take 2, 3 as long as you
Okay.
keep reminding me what the question was.
Okay, Ambassador.
Namaste to everybody in the hall. My name is Mohan Krishna Srestha. I come from diplomatic service and I was ambassador in France. At the same time, I have established one diplomatic think tank by the name of Center for Diplomacy and Development. I thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Apart from all you have said, my question is, in a very succinct way, how Nepal can benefit from $1 trillion Indian economy. In a very specific way, can you spell out? Because our country is suffering a huge amount of trade imbalance every year with India. Our economy has become import-based. Our manufacturing sector is very low, just 5% around. So we don't produce enough goods to export to India. This morning, when I was seeing the MSN, I read one news which said that your state minister, Patrick Margarita, he visited a small country in Africa called Eswatini. And he went there to inaugurate a research and development institute, which was funded by India. So apart from all the trade and investment issues, can the Indian government think of giving any type of help to Nepal, where people who are interested in research activities can indulge themselves so that they can further ideas to speed up our economic development? And I think that Indian economy now 4.187 trillion. You narrowly beat Japan by 1 million. Japanese economy is 4.186. So I also read somewhere that this Vikasit Bharat, by 2047, where the earlier target was $8 trillion economy. Now you have revised it, and according to Mr. Kuber, India will be achieving $10 trillion economy by next few years.
Mid-30s, by mid-30s.
Yeah, how you will achieve this? What are the strategies? Same type of strategy will continue, or you are going to bring some new ideas? If you can highlight something from your perspective, I'd be very thankful. Thank you.
Thank you. One more, then, yeah, please.
Hello, I'm Vivek, and I do research at the Truvan University, and I have a comment and a question. So my first comment is that on the course of our research, we're reading about how more than foreign trade amount or market access, it's actually the openness attributes that benefits the country opening up. Such openness manifests itself so intimately with all the aspects of economy that it benefits the overall economy. So when you highlighted the other aspects like connectivity and so connectivity are important. So thank you for that. That was the comment. And my question is that when you say when the tide rises, everybody rises, in context of Nepal, the adage could be when the tide rises, the poor man's boat capsizes. So how do you sort of assuage fears that with the $1 trillion ambition, our industry do not go drown like it happened with the trade liberalization of 90s? Thank you.
Thank you. So, answer, then we'll proceed. Okay, one more.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Resham Thapa, Tribhuvan University. First of all, I really appreciate this talk. Frank, balanced, and illuminating, I would say. First of all, I have one observation regarding the 5 points you prescribed initially. Let the story short. See, there is a hue and cry always in private sector that the government collects a lot of revenue, right? and you claim proudly that we are collecting a lot of revenues, right? Is private sector, Indian private sector, happy with it? And out of that, theory says that if government is really taking care of infrastructure and all the stuffs, government should not invest in manufacturing sector. And huge tax was collected, and you said that out of those tax, one of the major channel was we channeled it into manufacturing sector. And I was curious, how? Is government investing or banking sector, or how? How the huge tax collection really private sector are not very happy, I think, and how that was transmitted towards manufacturing sector. That should be very interesting for us as an academia and private sector in this floor as well. Now my second and final query is, I have 3 observations, right, in India-Nepal economic cooperation related. First one is it possible, do you think that sub-national government level cooperation is really possible in India and Nepal? And even if you guys are fighting India-China, and some of the Indian and Chinese local governments are really doing a very excellent, I would say, cooperations in between. And let's give the example of Science Park in Gujarat. Is it possible in Nepal, India, sub-national government level cooperations or projects or something like that? Second would be some trilateral projects. Do you think, let's say, I would be very happy to listen from you. Is it possible to have certain projects in Nepal, like the India, China, and Nepal projects? What do you think? And final one is some structural issues are there in Nepal case. You've been, global tour, globally you visited, and you've been to France and you've been to Switzerland, I know. And there are airports in Switzerland and France, and some of the, terminals are common. Do you think in near future there will be one airport in between India and Nepal border, and the terminal would be one underground terminal goes to India and one underground terminal comes to Nepal, and all the Nepalese working in Gulf comes to, and all the Indians working whoever in Gulf and use that airport and go to Bihar, and the Nepalese comes to Birganj? Do you think that level of cooperation, as Paul Collier suggests, is that level of cooperation possible within 50 years? Thank you.
We'll take further question, otherwise there is a risk that you'll forget the question.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm glad I noted the questions, but I may still forget, so my apologies from the beginning. But before I answer, I must tell you, when I joined the WTO, and obviously previous to that, I don't think I was a very eloquent speaker. I was extremely shy in school and college and never took part in everything, and gradually you learn. So one of the first things I was taught in the art of answering questions is to respond by saying, oh, that's a wonderful question. You must say that's a. The second thing I was taught was, well, that's a question which will take a long reply, so let's talk over coffee. But I'll try not to do either of these with this. Pradeep ji, you talked about this balance or the focus between services and manufacturing. Look, obviously the path that each country takes will be different. And also a lot will depend on the global canvas in which you are operating. 15 years back, there was a huge demand for services, and the Indian services sector really grew. Do the same opportunities exist today? Perhaps to a lesser extent, because there are a large number of countries which were which have now come to that stage when they can provide, the same kind of services export. So even for Nepal, again, and I say this perhaps with far less knowledge than you probably have, is that you have to focus on both sectors simultaneously. You simply cannot say that, look, manufacturing we will at the moment ignore because it's easier to get into the service sector, or perhaps in the manufacturing sector we don't yet have that kind of thrust from the government or the sector itself. But no, I think both sectors 100% have to go hand in hand, because in a way they complement each other too. You know, you're manufacturing something and sending it to, I mean, for instance, let's say Japan. And you have a services sector, it's suddenly you find the Japanese companies may also look for the same kind of services, offshoring their services to Nepal for that thing. They'll have to go hand in hand. But the second point you raised is very important. And I must admit, and I'll honestly admit that when I was going over and preparing the notes, this aspect didn't strike me. I talked about openness of trade and an open border and trade facilitation and, you know, cutting the time of goods transit. But yes, there is this big issue that you've raised. There are only two ways that I think of, that can come about. You know, and maybe the European Union is a good example. If there is conviction in India that the outer Nepalese border, that means not the one that borders India, but the outer Nepalese border, whether it's coming in by air or by land, is secure. Is that is a border which is secure, where, you know, infiltration of any kind is not taking place. I think that's the only way that the security along the Indian-Nepalese border can be, you know, can be lessened to an extent and facilitate movement. But until that happens, you're going to have, yes, you're right, you're going to have bottlenecks because of the security aspect. There have been, as we are all aware, some incidents in the past, I know long back in history, but still they linger on at times. So I think really, maybe that joint economic forum that I suggested should actually have a vertical which looks at how this trust on the security aspect can be improved. It'll be a very, very important point. So actually, thank you for raising it. And perhaps I will, in the work that we do as part of Chintan, we'll certainly take it on board. Ambassador Shresth, what a pleasure to make your acquaintance. You know, I think coming straight to your question, whether or not you know, India can help in the kind of setting up of a research project, my suggestion again based on a fair amount of development cooperation that I was privy to while in WTO, that money from an external donor, no matter who it is, flows far easily when the host country has demonstrated its belief in that project by first putting in the first step itself. Rather, you know, you ask someone that, okay, just help me set this up totally. It can happen, but it happens with a lot of questions, a lot of, you know, with some delays. But wherever the host country has said, look, this is important for me, I'm taking the first step, this is what I've done already, and then seeks donor funding, it becomes far easier. So research, and I would therefore perhaps divide my response into two parts. I cannot underscore the importance of research. It fits into what my earlier remarks about adapting technology also. You know, what's really required for Nepal, only you know, institutes like you mentioned will know. You set it up, you start it, then its expansion, its growth, its future, we can always look for partnerships through development cooperation. Vivek, again, you said it so brilliantly. You know, it's not just the tide that the two boats, but what if the poor man's boat capsizes? Let me answer it through the word I used about dependence. You know, you have two absolutely individual boats, then yes, you run the risk of a smaller, ill-equipped boat, which you called the poor man's boat, capsizing if the tide converts to a storm. Right? Two completely. But I spoke, though without at that stage knowing about you know, what you've asked, about dependence. And let's translate that dependence into two boats which are in a way connected with whatever, a rope or an anchor or something. And if you have two connected boats, then one will not capsize. Then the two would remain together. So perhaps, and it's again a very useful point you make, to ensure that the two boats remain up together, you need an interconnectedness which ensures dependence, and then it's like, we float together, we sing together. Resham Thapaji, clearly you are a professor who thinks a lot. So really, no, I think some of your points, and maybe I should start with the last one. I genuinely, no matter how much of the future or how much of only, let's say, oh, you guys are dreaming of this, it may be true. But I just loved your idea about, an airport which has 2 terminals. All my life, whether it was even the Geneva railway station, it has 2 platforms which are in France and 6 platforms which are in Switzerland, or the Geneva airport where you can, go out of either side. I think, really, I mean, that is something I would happily, with the due, intellectual property rights to you, and I've noted your name very carefully, Resham Thapaji. Do give me your contact after this. Probably write an opinion piece on this, and if it gets published in a newspaper, you will find a mention of your name. Would come. I think it is something. It's not altruistic. It is not something that we should just dream of. And until you dream, unless and until you dream, where do you get it? So that's tri-national cooperation with India, China, Nepal. Perhaps I would even say more difficult at this stage. India, Nepal, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, definitely. And perhaps for India, Bangladesh, there's already, some kind of an agreement. India, China, at the moment, relationships have taken a beating in the last few years. A lot is being done from both sides, I presume, to improve it. But, this very funny thing about trust, it takes years to build up, and it takes moments and, much quicker to lose it. So we are in the process of building up trust after it was lost with that incident. So not in the best of situation. Subnational cooperation, I think it's a great idea. It's actually a great idea, and you have a number of very important states which border Nepal, and I think these are primed for subnational cooperation. But subnational cooperation would also come about with the blessings of the federal government. Obviously, on both sides, the federal government would want to have an involvement. Now, there are 2 kinds. We also saw it, I've seen it in Africa, where it is the federal government on one side and the subnational government on the other side. Now, I don't know if your question meant subnational on both sides, or if your question meant federal on one side and subnational on the other. But I think there's nothing to prevent that, because the real benefit or the stepping stone would come about from there. And your first point is, how is money actually going into manufacturing? Sure, manufacturing did figure in the 4 areas where I said government is providing support. Actually is the right word. Infra strongly it's giving it. But for manufacturing, the way you do it is you provide, let's say, subsidies for funding. So if the bank's giving a certain amount of thing and you are in niche areas, you provide funding. Then we have lots of schemes under the overall Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, where you are strongly supporting manufacturing. So it's not going directly to an industry. You're not giving money saying, okay, here's money and you set this up, but in a way it's going as support and subsidy. So very, very interesting questions, and thank you so much.
Microphone, please. Here, and here Secretary might be like to say something about WTO. And
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful presentation. So my question is very simple. There are several reports coming in Nepali media that India is reluctant to buy electricity from Nepal built with Chinese investment. So what's your thought on that matter? Thank you so much.
thank you. Another.
I'm Brigadier General, retired, Nepalese Army. My salute to you, sir. I do love to read your national interest and national security issues of Nepal and India. And I have few queries about our bilateral trade transit. And I'm very much aware of you people, very intelligent, very united in national security. You have single voice. Also, I was so lucky to listen the lecture of former Ambassador Abdul Kalam while I was in Old Delhi, Timarpur. I had many trainings, especially army trainings in India. It's my background. Sir, very few points you mentioned here. I would be so much happier if you could be the Chief of Army Staff for a few years of India, then after Prime Minister. I do see some barriers, exactly, I cannot say barriers, but some hurdles or barriers in our smoothness between the trade and transits, but we have excellent relation between peoples to people since our history. The first is our trade and transit treaties. It is like a political opens sometimes for the trade and transit bilaterally. The second is the 1950s treaty and the clause, I think, number 5. If we do purchase or we buy our defense logistics, it is mentioned as from or via India. Via or from India, number 2. And we have got a few border disputes in between. Sometimes our politicians, they are making cash for the votes, and it definitely hinders our people-to-people relations. And the open border also. The blames go to each of the countries in terms of national security issues. I guess India gets the boundaries with all the South Asian nations except India. We should be considering it. I guess final, the Chinese factor. Yes, we cannot change our geography. China is there, India is there, Nepal is here. So, we cannot ignore India and ignore China. So, our neighbors, I mean, especially Indian scholars, they're looking after some, I mean, Chinese factor to hinder our bilateral, we could say economic relation, political relations, so that I guess you are the ambassador. You could pursue to formulate our foreign policy. Also the defense gesturing, you know, your military gets very strong position in order to have our bilateral relation and the dispute of our border issues. So that, sir, could you please consider my queries about our smooth relation. Thank you very much for your the excellent and outstanding presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself and have a short question.
Yeah, I'm Keshav Prasad Chaulagai. I have one practical questions in presence of the today's keynote speaker, and question goes to the NICCI, Nepal India Chamber of Commerce, Nepal India Chamber of Commerce Industry. Nepal India Chamber of Commerce Industry had published one book. It called the Nepal Religious and Spiritual Side of Nepal and India. very good book, which may generate the 10 million religious tourists from India. But they published the book, but there is no any programs in projects. And this, because I have traveled in 2 times, from Muktinath to Kanyakumari in 1988, and Kanyakumari to Dwarika and Badrinath 2nd time in 1992. Where the religious pilgrimage tour, it was the complete by foot, not the by the bus or by the vehicle. Yeah? I have traveled. Our groups have traveled. And if we convert it, this route, as a religious tourism project, it is similar to the Phoenician route culture tourism project, which is running by the Mediterranean country, 18 Mediterranean country, supported by the EU and in the banner of the UN. So if this project, is religious project, will be implemented, 10 million religious people, tourism, it may come from the India. So NICC will lead, and Mr. Shishir Priyadarshi may be advocate or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll facilitate that. Maybe private sector can work on that. The private sector from both the countries, you might want it to say. Okay, we'll stop here, then we'll have answers. Okay, please. One then, yeah.
Namaste.
One, okay.
My name is Bijan Bhatrai. I'm from AIDIA, Institute for Integrated Development Studies, possibly the oldest think tank in Nepal. During your talk, sir, you talked about the relationship between Mexico. You compared relationship between Mexico and US. Sorry to say that, but I don't think we Nepalis are too proud to be just a satellite state of India, because looking at the economic journey, and you yourself acknowledge that even Nepal has grown during the last decade after opening up. And we've done it despite the help of our existing neighbors. We have a $20 economy on the northern side. You're a $4 trillion economy, growing to become $10 trillion in a few years. And we have absolutely gained nothing from this development in our backyards. And there are growing, concern and voices within the academia, within the think tanks, within the various circles that perhaps maybe it's time we should acknowledge this and maybe look beyond India and China. What are your thoughts?
Thank you again. Let me start, butterize up with your question. Maybe I can, in some ways, go in the reverse order again. I took a great deal of pains to say that I do not like the word satellite. I said that's a term used by others when they define the relationship between Mexico and US and Vietnam and China. And I think I twice said that I don't like that term. For me, the term really is partnership manufacturing. So I think you and I are on the same page as far as that is concerned. Looking beyond India and China, and for that, I think it's a most unambiguous yes. You're saying that perhaps Nepal hasn't benefited as much as it should have from, a 20 trillion and a 4 trillion economies on both sides. I'll even go to the extent of saying that even if it had benefited, or even if it has, you still must look beyond this. Why not? I mean, the world is an oyster. Why should you be limited here? And I'm sure in some ways you already are. I don't think Nepal is really. You look at your services export, you look at the kind of mode 4 and mode 3 exports to the Middle East, you look at the kind of relationship that Nepal has, increasingly building with the European Union. I think really Nepal's already doing that, but yes, I mean, even more so. There's no reason to be transcribed by that. Keshav Prasadji, absolutely. I mean, I would, I mean, I think I mentioned how I started my whole professional career with in a way, a religious setting, in the way of, but that was Buddhist. But I'm you know, as far as the Hindu connect between in the context of religious tourism is concerned, and I have this feeling that this is being very strongly looked at on both sides, perhaps even more strongly on the Nepalese side, because this could be a large revenue earner for the country. What you really need to ensure is that it's appropriately marketed and sold. You know, the last thing that people want is, and I know this from domestic religious tourism in India, the last thing you want to do is go to a religious place and find the religious sanctity being diluted by, I would call, various kinds of religious middlemen or touts coming and saying, you know, we'll get this done, we'll get that done, you do this. I think, so it's really the marketing and delivery of religious tourism. The scope is immense. I mean, it might even be far more than 10 million, but I think it's an important point. So maybe I'll answer your question even before I go to General Saab. Yes, I have also read exactly what you have talked about. It's not just related to Nepal, it's kind of, you know, this overall thrust which was there that, you know, and this started after that incident between the two countries. But you know what is surprising, and again, these are just factual figures, in spite of all that was said at that time, Indian imports from China haven't really gone down. So in every country, I think every country, and I'm not, I mean, no, I don't want my remarks in any way to be misconstrued. In every country, there is something that is said which is in the public domain, and something that happens irrespective of what is being said in the public domain. You probably get my my response. You know, there's something, and you know, let it be said in the public domain. If look, an easier way for me to answer. India is facing a lot of backlash for buying oil from Russia continuously. India responds to that, but does it not continue to buy Russian oil? It does. Look, if I'm being offered oil, which is, let us say, 30% or 40%, actually, yes, maybe 60% at times even cheap, why would I not do it? So, be assured about that. That's my feeling. Sir, I kept your question for the last. Such a pleasure to listen to you. And really, I think, you know, and probably no one knows it better than you, that relationships between two countries are based on a large number of pillars. But somehow, you know, what was once told to me, that the easiest example to give is based on three pillars. I mean, and they're obviously things that we've talked about. It's the economic pillar, it's the social pillar, which includes everything else, and it's the security pillar. But why three pillars? And in some countries, you know, one of the pillars could be different. The three pillars is because relationship between two countries is like a tripod. Any one of those pillars fall and the tripod falls. So what you've said is a very, very important thing, including about transit, including about defense. And obviously you can't, I mean, there's no reason to ignore China. China is as important a neighbor to your north as India would feel it is to your south. But, you know, and I'll conclude with that, is that I really liked your remark. Thank you for that, about aspiration of what you would like me to see. But personally, all I want to now be is a very proud grandfather. That's as far as my ambition goes. That's all that I want to be, sir. So, but thank you still.
We have a lot of questions, and I also have some questions, but for the time being, it's already, we are running out of time, so we'll continue our discussion during the coffee also. For the time being, there is a signing ceremony between the Chintan Foundation and AIDIA Nepal. So will you please help bring that table so that the gentleman can sign here? Page, so that Chintan Foundation, Chintan Research Foundation President Shishir Priyadarshi and AIDA founder Sunil Kesi will sign the MOU between the two research institutions of Nepal and India. Please exchange with pleasure. Yes, sir. Now a small gift, token of love to the president of Chintan Research Foundation from AIDIA founder Sunil Kesi. Since he started his career from Kushinagar, so I think it's the matching token of love. You'll never forget that. So I'll ask researcher Chabi Basista also to come to the stage so that Sajinaji will hand over the token of love. Chabiji is with Chintan Research Foundation. She is researcher at the foundation. Thank you, Chabiji, for all your efforts. Now, I'll ask Sajinaji to give vote of thanks so that we can continue our discussion during the coffee also. Please.
Namaste and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So I hope we all enjoyed this very insightful and engaging interaction. So on behalf of the Asian Institute of Diplomacy and International Affairs, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to everyone who contributed to the success of this third AIDA Distinguished Lecture. So we are deeply grateful to our distinguished keynote speaker, Mr. Shishir Priyadarshi, sir, for his insightful and thought-provoking deliberations and engagements. So we would also like to thank all the dignitaries and participants who have for your valuable presence and active participations. And also would like to thank Dr. Chabi Basist, who had like seamless coordination for this program. And our sincere thanks goes to our sponsors and the partners, especially Sanima GIC Insurance Limited, Lumbini Buddhist University, Motidan Construction Sewa Private Limited, Plumber Pipes, SG Group, Mountain Infrared Private Limited, and Nepal India Chamber of Commerce and Industry for supporting this important event. So thank you once again, and I think this MOU will bear us very fruitful activities in the future. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I think we'll have some fresh refreshments in that sections. So thank you once again.